We've got a great session planned for you this afternoon, and what I'd like to do is go ahead and invite our panelists out, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. So let's go ahead and get started. Great. Jeff, why don't we go ahead and start with you, and we'll work our way down the panel.
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. I'm Jeff Oldham, Vice President of the Benefit Store. We focus on consumer-related benefits. Talked a lot about income protection this morning, but also digital health and financial health.
Hey, everybody. I'm Seth Gregory. I'm Director of Data Science and Benefit Focus. I've been here coming on 6 years this summer and lead a team of data scientists and analysts, about a dozen of them who work on research and architecture as well as machine learning and new product development.
Good afternoon, I'm Ron Houghton. I work nationally with our customers on our core and advanced analytics product line. Been associated with this technology for a little over 15 years now, originally starting my work as a broker and claims administration.
Hi everyone, I'm Jen Clark. I'm a data scientist. I lead our research effort at Benefit Focus. I've been with Benefit Focus for about 2 years, and I'm passionate about promoting responsible research.
Great. To provide a little bit of context for our discussion today, we know that as employers, you've just wrapped up open enrollment. You're evaluating how open enrollment went this past year, thinking about open enrollment for 2016 already, taking a look at your communication strategies and seeing what worked and didn't work when it came to engaging your employees, thinking about whether you should introduce a high deductible health plan or should you increase the deductible for a PPO. We also know that for those of you here in the room that are with insurance carriers, your product development process is already very far along. You're thinking about new products and services that you could introduce to employers. And as an industry, we've had access to a great set of tools to help inform these decisions. We work with consultants and brokers and product advisors to think about plan design and plan selection. We design thoughtfully put together employee surveys, and we deploy them to our workforce to collect information from our employees as we think about plan design. And we also rely on industry surveys like the Kaiser Family Foundation to inform how we think about benefits going forward. The team sitting in front of you today has been working with me along with a number of other Benefit Focus associates for the better part of 7 months now to think about additional tools that we could invest in on your behalf to help you think about and prepare for open enrollment in 2016. And we're excited to share some of this with you today. Sean hinted a little bit at this study today during the keynote. We're calling it the State of Employee Benefits. And this initially started out as one research project, one research study, and as we began to put it together, we realized it was actually far more than that. It's made up of a series of research studies that we'll publish across the next few months and across the coming year. The first is a study that we published in February focused on the large market, so those employers with more than 1,000 employees. We'll follow that up with a look at what we're defining as the mid-market, those with between 100 employees and 999 employees. And then we'll have a series of ongoing studies that we'll publish that we're calling industry deep dives that will look at specific segments that we can go deep on. Before we get started and provide a little more detail on the research itself, I'd love to invite Seth, who leads the data science team here at Benefit Focus. There were some significant investments we had to make in our platform to be able to even do this research.
Right, yeah, absolutely, Kevin. So historically, a lot of companies, and including ourselves, that generally use the same data sources for the same types of services, meaning you use the same literal data for your web applications as you do for analytics and reporting. And it's always been done for the right reasons for cost savings with storage. But to really truly build an enterprise benefits management platform, you need to utilize different data sources for different use cases. And for the past 2 to 3 years, coming on almost 4 years, we've really been taking a behind-the-scenes look and building a new analytics platform, which Sean alluded to earlier, that we call the Data Cloud. And part of that is built upon the Hadoop ecosystem. And it really isolates data for different use cases. What's really exciting about this is it's a very powerful system that allows us to take all these transactional data and really anonymize and aggregate it across the board, across all industries and across all types of information, and really create new insights and new information from it. which further leads into the development of personalization. It's a level of analytics and level of insight that you need to personalize the application. And that's some of the exciting outcomes that we've had in the last few years.
Yep. And Jen, maybe you could add some color. You were the lead researcher on this. What's unique about the study?
Yeah, so this is not a survey. This is actual consumer behavioral data. It's real people making real choices. As Kevin said, surveys are a great tool, but they have lots of limitations. They have limited sample sizes. They are aggregated from self-reported data from a retrospective vantage point, and they're often subject to survey bias and missing data. And that means that they have to be imputed using proprietary formulas. In contrast, what we've done with this study is provide real-time big data aggregation and transparent averages.
Cool. And Ron, one of the things we talked about early on in the study as we looked at the various segments that we wanted to look at was the impact that employer size would have on some of the findings.
Yeah, certainly one of the things we would expect was the large employers, Kevin, are really leading the charge here. But to Jen's point, those plan design choices and the options were available generally based upon broad-based information. And what's exciting about this work, certainly in the initial findings here, is the ability to have more detailed information to get more personalized type of plans and plan offerings available.
Great. Well, with that, why don't we take a look at the study itself. So, Jen, do you want to provide some context on the diversity here?
Sure. We have over 17 industries represented in the sample. The top 3, as you see here, is education, healthcare, and manufacturing. And surveys typically only highlight about 7 or 8.
And then why study diversity important here?
Our sample size is very heterogeneous, and that provides us a broader aspect of consumer behavior and provides us additional opportunities for research insight.
The other thing that's interesting here about the research is it's based on actual election data from over 700,000 enrollments from this past open enrollment period. Maybe, Jen, you could talk a little bit about what's unique here.
Yeah, so when I see the slide, I get really excited. This is the largest study of its kind, and like we said, it's actual consumer behavioral data. It's real enrollment records, anonymized and aggregated, and provided, for you guys.
And we spent a lot of time talking about some of the, we've talked about the convergence of 4 generations of talent in the workforce here, but why did we split millennials between over 26 and under 26?
It was important to split millennials out into 2 groups so as trends wouldn't be lost. Millennials who are required to buy insurance for the first time are behaving differently than those who can still be covered by their parents' plan.
Great. So why don't we dig into it? What you'll see is that we actually organized this around a series of key themes that we found from this past open enrollment. The first is decisions, just the concept of choice. I think one of the things that we should all be excited about as a community is that choice is alive and well on the Benefit Focus platform. Let's take a look at some of these. The first is that, as Jeff shared during keynote this morning, 52% of large groups offer at least one high-deductible health plan on the Benefit Focus platform. Going a step further, we also found that 6% of large employers have actually gone full replacement. So, Jeff, maybe a question to you. What's surprising or not surprising about this?
It's interesting. We've been looking at this for quite some time, and even in advance of ACA, and I would even argue if ACA wasn't even here, that you would see comparable percentages just because a number of large employers have almost sort of run out of options around whether it's plan design or increase or decrease ER visits and things of that nature. But needless to say, I think ACA accelerated it, and I don't know if many people in here, when they walked in, recognize that when you combine the 52 with the 6, that 58% have at least one. I think that's fairly significant and possibly even just getting started.
And Ron, what do you think about the percent of large employers that have gone full replacement?
As Jeff mentioned, that certainly HDHP is not going to be the silver bullet for everyone, especially those with higher risk healthcare decisions. One of the things that we did see in the data was the introduction of choice really drove some of that consumer engagement, and we think there's a demand out there, and certainly with the younger workforce coming into play where it's expected more options and more things available, I think that'll continue to grow, but it'll be steady and somewhat thoughtful.
And let's take a look at the number of options that employees have on the platform based on plan design. So what we saw was For large employers that are pursuing a traditional kind of PPO or maybe HMO strategy, they're offering about 2.5 plans. Those that are going full replacement are offering 2 high deductible health plans, and employees who work for employers that are offering both tend to have more choice on average, close to just over 3 plans to choose from. What do you think in terms of the number of plan options that we're seeing here?
I think at some point the number of choices will increase to the point where there's some dilution of options there. And I know that Seth has had some findings along those lines where once we got to a certain point that it did diminish a little bit.
Right, yeah, absolutely. And looking at this, I believe employers are actually kind of getting this right. From some of our analyses, we've really realized that in terms of improving HDHP adoption, it's not necessarily a linear relationship between the number of offerings and the election patterns. What we've been initially finding is kind of multimodal, in that 2 is actually better than 1, but as you get over 2, you start to see some decline, which probably is due to choice overload and the users becoming paralyzed for decision-making perspective.
And then, I think one of the things we've talked about is the need to invest in decision support tools, which we've been doing for some time. Ron, as you think about the kind of next generation of tools that large employers would be investing in here?
Sure, certainly claims-based decision support is going to be key, and we heard that this morning throughout the keynote, that personalization is going to become more of the rule as opposed to the exception. And as these type of options expand going into the future with the younger workforce coming into play, that will also continue to drive some of that as well.
And one of the things we've talked about or heard a good deal about is we're interested in is the percent of employees selecting high deductible health plans. I think a lot of the industry studies tend to show an adoption rate of somewhere between 25 and 27%. We found 41% of employees on the platform, when given the option to select a high deductible health plan, are selecting one. And Seth, there's something very unique about this study and our platform that allows us to calculate this. You want to elaborate?
Yeah, absolutely. So this kind of falls back on these snapshots that we've been collecting about users, and this is real information about users going through the system at a given point in time, their eligibility at a given point in time, the plans they may be best matched to at a given point in time, as well as what they're offered. And I know Jen did a great job alluding to this earlier. But it's very important. This is a significant differentiator with us, with this research and the rest of the research in the area, is that this is true choice. These are users who went through the system and were presented with options at a given point in time. There's no more guessing what a user may have seen or may have been eligible for. We know these things, and from an experimental design perspective, this is great, and it's exceptional, and it really differentiates this research from other research in the industry.
So it's a big step forward from self-reported service.
Absolutely.
And Jeff, what does this statistic tell you about employers on the platform?
It tells me a couple things. One is that when you give access to personalized claims data where folks can look back the previous 12 months to ascertain how they spent money on medical and RX care, and then, of course, the ability to forecast that in the next 12 months, the possibilities in themselves of people logging in and actually consciously selecting an HDHP, not having any kind of buyer's remorse. I think with that kind of data, people are obviously able to make the right decision. And secondarily, I actually just don't know how people buy healthcare without that kind of information. Outside of folks that just want the cheapest plan in and of itself. But I don't know anyone that's going to go home and sort of download EOBs and download their scripts and run a pivot table and things of that nature. But at least, at least I'm not, for the record. But allowing you to do it with sliders and particularly on a tablet and mobile is definitely, I think, why it's higher than industry average.
And Ron, I'm curious from your perspective, does this mean consumerism is alive and well on the platform?
Sure, I think we've turned the corner there. The thing that's interesting is, plan design itself does not really serve as a complete method for managing utilization. So, that's a component of it overall. But one thing, to Jeff's point too, with the introduction of more choices, the need for those kind of decision support services and kind of the fact base or claim database decisions are really going to drive that, and I think that will also serve to help increase the participation of some of the HDHP plans as well.
For our insurance carrier partners that are here in the room, what's the implication there?
Right, especially where employer groups have traditionally just offered a single PPO option, this whole concept of choice is really going to be new to them. So things such as pet insurance we heard this morning, some of the voluntary products and other types of coverages are going to be more and more important as that level of choice expands and increases.
Great. The next kind of logical step for us to do is to also take a look across demographic segments and see what we're seeing in terms of adoption. And we talked about this briefly this morning, but if you look across the segments that we identified, traditionalists all the way down to millennials under 26, we're seeing millennials and to a lesser extent Gen Xers kind of leading the adoption of high deductible health plans. Is this surprising to you, Jeff, or why do you think that is?
My next life I'm going to be a PowerPoint model. This isn't terribly surprising, I guess, if I start from the right and move to the left. With millennials, particularly those under 26, they're graduating now with, student loans that I never dreamed of. So I think from a priority perspective, that's probably where their focus is paying down off of that debt and perhaps even saving for their first house. And the traditionalists on the other side, these folks have been in PPOs their entire career. They're also older. Maybe there's a greater probability that they're going to have some kind of chronic disease and things of that nature. So for me, the bookends make a ton of sense.
Now, one of the things you can see about this panel is we intentionally picked these folks to work on this research project as well. So Jeff and I like the Breakfast Club. Ron's a big fan of the Big Chill. But we haven't figured out, maybe Jen, do you agree with Jeff or disagree?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Jeff didn't touch on is I also think that I'm invincible. I haven't really thought about my health care too much since I'm young and healthy. But in all seriousness, we have competing financial goals. We have student loan debt, we're saving for our first houses and our children, and there's just not a lot of money to go around.
And when it comes to engaging millennials from a communications perspective, do you have advice for those in the room?
Yeah, anything on my smartphone is usually great. I'm a huge, I love social media. I'm always on Twitter. It's embedded in my daily life. The notifications pop up. I constantly get the buzzes and the tweets. So anything that you can engage with on my mobile is just great.
And Jeff, implications for voluntary benefits plan design when it...
Yeah, I mean, certainly within HDHP adoption, as we discussed this morning, there is that additional exposure, particularly while people are just building up their HSA account, and even traditionalists in and of themselves, if they're still remaining in PPOs, they have the greater probability of perhaps even utilizing those products. So, we're definitely spending a lot of time on HDHPs, but we still see a lot of what we call faux HDHPs, where you're in a PPO and your deductible is $1,000 or $1,500 or what have you. So I think everyone is sort of faced with those kinds of gaps, so to speak, regardless of the kind of plan they're in.
So we talked about a couple of different findings here from a choice perspective. 52% of large employers are offering at least one HDHP, 6% have gone full replacement. 42% of employees are selecting HDHP when offered one, and millennials and Gen Xers are kind of leading the high deductible health plan adoption among large employers. The next thing that led us to was dollars and cents. How are we doing from a plan cost perspective? You guys can see my marketing team got a little creative with the license plate here. So, one of the things we see on the Benefit Focus platform, we took a look at 2016 total premiums and then did a 8% annual cost increase to get us to 2020. And for the most part, large employers are safe from the Cadillac tax, both from a family perspective and then, looking at individual plans as well. Ron, give us your take on the situation here. Do you think...
what comes to mind here is don't be fooled by ACA, right? Because plan design alone really is not a solution for managing trends. So just because we're below those thresholds now, I think we're relatively safe for now. The other thing to keep in mind, however, is that the Cadillac tax it's indexed on the Cadillac tax and not inflation. So that while that 8% may be conservative, I can recall in the not too distant past where we were looking at double-digit kind of trends. So safe for now, but planful.
Yep. And Jeff, from your perspective, what if the Cadillac tax goes away? Does this change the conversation?
No. I mean, even if the Cadillac tax was removed and ACA is in and of itself abolished or what have you, I don't see employers leaving this conference room saying, congratulations, our deductibles are going down and copays are back to $5 and chest bumping and things of that nature. I think really consumerism is is here to stay, and maybe I think one of my favorite books that probably outlines what I call responsible consumerism. It's a book that was written in the, I think, mid-90s called The Company That Saved Healthcare by Sarah Graff, about a 1200 life manufacturing group in Wisconsin. And to Ron's point, it's not just plan design that's going to get there, but it's really educating folks and ensuring that just being a utilizer of healthcare is a part of the corporate DNA. I think that's one of the best examples that I've seen around how not solely relying on plan design, but having behavior and becoming more of an active participant in healthcare obviously reaps great benefits.
Now, one of the things we also took a look at, and you'll see this in the research report, which we'll have available at the Benefit Focus booth, was deductibles. And I think one thing that was particularly interesting was when we looked at large employer PPO deductibles. On the individual side, the IRS limit to qualify as a high deductible health plan is $1,300, and PPO deductibles are starting to approach that. Ron, do you think employers will continue to increase PPO deductibles or use that as leverage?
Well, as the resident baby boomer, I can recall much lower deductibles, and my friend Seth shared with me that he can as well. So it hasn't been that long ago that we had much lower deductibles, and we've seen certainly increasing trend, and as the deductibles increase to try and curb that, I think what happens, Kevin, in this is the lines potentially get a little blurred between the deductible on a PPO versus the deductible on a HDHP, because for many times, to the employee population at large who's not necessarily as informed as they could be, a lot of times the decision to choose Plan A or Plan B, the first metric is the deductible. And when those become so close in line with each other, it's difficult for them to distinguish which plan option without having more personalized messaging around either of those.
And Jeff, what's your thought on it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I know we had a lot of conversations this morning just solely focused on HDHPs, but again, because your average American doesn't have a great deal of savings and almost, we're sort of believe we're invincible, and of course the economy has something to do with that. There's still a tremendous opportunity, even when people are in PPOs, that when unexpected illnesses or accidents arise, as you can see here by these deductibles, the majority of Americans don't have this kind of money around. So there's certainly a great educational opportunity here around critical illness and accident and hospital indemnity.
Yep. Great. So to summarize, a couple of findings. Large employers are safe from the Cadillac tax for the most part for now. Now, one of the things we'll share in the mid-market study that we'll publish in April is that the situation's a little different as you go down market. Large employer PPO deductibles are approaching IRS thresholds. And then the next thing we talked about was the deductible gap, and we wanted to take a look at FSA, HSA contributions, as well as demographic segments around those. One of the things I think that we first noticed, FSA contributions, a product that's been around for a while, still remain well below annual contribution limits. Why do you think that is, Ron? Do you think folks kind of understand the concept of the FSA?
I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that maybe FSAs have never really been seen, in my opinion, a true funding source for healthcare. It's been rather a use it or lose it, and where we got that term, I'm not sure, but I think that had a bit of a connotation to it that was somewhat negative. So as a result, that's continued to linger as we've moved into HSAs and even HDHP, because a lot of folks will say, well, that's like that FSA thing that I had where I had to rush out at the end of the year and bought a bunch of glasses for my family. Yeah. I never did that.
Seth, have you ever stocked up on contact lens solution at a CVS?
Oh, at the end of the year? No, not yet.
So I think that's contributed, Kevin, to that piece. Yeah.
Well, that's a good segue. So one of the things we also want to understand, we talked about our good friend the millennial earlier. They're kind of leading the charge in high deductible health plan adoption. So how are they doing when it comes to their HSAs? Are they fully charged? We looked at a couple of stats here. We looked at average out-of-pocket maximum for the high deductible health plans on the platform, $4,200. Average HDHP deductible on the platform was $2,100. And then the average HSA contribution, including both employee and employer match, was $1,200. Jeff, what's your thought here?
Well, I think as this picture well depicts, if I'm a millennial, I'm focused on hair products and toboggans. I'm, It's just not HSA for these folks. I mean, first and foremost, they're buying them because they're the cheapest, I think, the majority of the time. Secondarily, as we saw on the previous slide with FSAs, I don't think there's a great deal of education or knowledge. But then again, when you're 23 and you don't have a child and things of that nature, that's not terribly surprising. I think once they are able to transition off of, or at least to dilute their student loan debt value and things of that nature, and of course, once you get married and get older, you definitely want to try to maximize that, but nothing too terribly surprising about this.
Yep. And Jen, from your perspective, is this just a case of limited savings opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. I think we can be a little glib about millennials being, not forward thinking, but we have to realize that they're just starting out in their careers and there's just not enough money to go around, and they need to, educational opportunity for them.
Yep. And again, when it comes to an HSA, how would you want that to be communicated to?
Anything mobile. But seriously, I drive that point home. Sean said this morning, asynchronous. I can pick up my text message and look at it after dinner, or on the train. Going or even on an airplane. I can access it when it's meaningful to me.
And Seth, is the other millennial on the panel?
Yeah, especially from my perspective, it needs to be quick. As Shane mentioned earlier, we've got attention spans less than or shorter than a goldfish, and in Shane's case, even shorter than that. So if you're gonna, if you're showing a video or something, make it quick and make it objective too. Back it by data, and also along the path of education and actually educate so that people are not seeing this as just another component of insurance, but that it's really an investment in both your financial wellness as well as your health wellness.
I mean, I will say, not to beat up on millennials though, but they've really influenced our space a ton. I mean, the idea of when a millennial or heck even someone else logs in now, you have an expectation that you're going to be able to compare products side by side, that you're going to be able to sort those products based upon certain features, that you're going to have very easy to use sliders and things of that nature. I mean, when I started, enrollment was in triplicate and there was no decision support whatsoever. So I will say that the massive influence of millennials is definitely felt, at Benefit Focus with Matt Brown's team, in that I think they have really brought their logic to impact our thought process around how we develop software.
Yeah, I'd add too, Kevin, that, so I know some employers say, well, I don't have a lot of millennials in my workforce. Speaking as a baby boomer, I have 4 millennials in my household, and I can tell you that even though as an employee, I necessarily may not fit that mold, but I'm exposed to those kind of shopping options and that kind of technology and things. So for many of us as employers where we have not so many millennials in the marketplace, it's still going to affect, I think, how those decisions, what the expectations are.
And it wasn't just millennials that were perhaps underfunding their HSAs. We took a look at individuals as well, and you could think of the gap to 2016 IRS limit as opportunity or as lost savings. What surprises you here, Ron, when you look at the breakdown?
Well, maybe not surprisingly, and to my last point there, baby boomers and Gen X as being, pretty similar there. I think a lot of that is influenced just by, what we see in the marketplace in other areas, whether it's, online shopping for, day-to-day products and services, whether it's how we choose our travel. And so just those expectations that folks have. And as you look at the financial commitments, the financial responsibilities, I know for me personally, I'm going to pay more attention to those things because I have kids moving into college and those. So the savings opportunities are more interesting to me. So I think back to that personalized type of information that applies to me individually as opposed to just generalized information about employee benefits.
I don't know, Ron, you let me know if I'm off here. I don't know if 100% of baby boomers and traditionalists have actually connected the dots around, pre-tax savings attributed to HSA, that I can actually take that with me and, use my HSA as a medical retirement fund above and beyond Medicare, almost like the 401k equivalent for medical. I look at this and, traditionalists, so they've been in the workforce longer, they're probably earning a little bit more. I guess this sort of number surprised me because, as closer as I get to retirement, I'm going to definitely try to maximize this for my post-work life.
Right, yeah, I definitely agree with that point, Jeff. You know, if you were to kind of take a separate look at this and you kind of normalize these results and in turn actually taking these numbers in blue and dividing them by the actual expected health care that year, and it looks like people are contributing based on their risk and based on how much they expect to contribute to health care rather than actually fulfilling a financial investment. So I definitely agree, Jeff.
Yeah, that's a great observation. And then we also looked at families. We saw large gaps as well, but perhaps traditionalist baby boomers, Gen Xers putting away a bit more for a rainy day. Would you agree, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably the good example of, once I had a family and everything, that's where I sort of turned the corner on HSAs, and then once I better understood sort of the investment opportunities and the tax savings, I definitely became far more interested. So it is not too terribly surprising that the older you become, it looks like, the more that you're able to contribute to your HSA. Of course, you're making more money as well. So it seems like this really just sort of follows other statistics that we've had that shows millennials, they're dealing with other issues, having to pay off other things. But then as you get older and then as your life progresses, then it seems like folks are then turning a corner.
And you agree, Ron?
Absolutely, yeah.
Great.
Deep thoughts.
Deep thoughts.
Deep thought.
Absolutely. One of the findings as well, we took a look at large employers who are offering what would be defined as some of the traditional gap benefits products in the enrollment workflow on the Benefit Focus platform, and found 64% of large employers weren't offering one. Jeff, is this they aren't offering them, or they're just not offering them in the online enrollment experience?
So I'm thinking a couple things when I look at this. One is we definitely see this in the benefit store before we start working with clients. These types of products were either enrolled on paper because perhaps their ERP system couldn't handle it, or secondarily they enrolled face-to-face or over the phone, so as a result it wasn't on the platform. Also, sometimes I see that with ERPs, and again, in advance of folks working with us, we had this great slide a few slides ago around simplicity of offer, and Seth alluded to that, after you get to 2, then that's really what you need. We've definitely found that out in an accident and other plans around just a high-low. We've come across other customers that have literally had like 10 options, and to me, when you present that, I think you're inadvertently, if anything, pushing people off to buy it. So there's tons of opportunity here when you look at the higher PPOs and the CDHPs to allow folks on their own to buy additional coverage to protect their risk.
And what do you, Jeff, when you think about some of the, these were just some of the traditional products like accident, what are that next generation of products you're seeing through the benefit store?
Yeah, it's interesting. My favorite thing about this morning was Sean's piece around Beyond. And, for as long as I've been in the space, regardless if you're a millennial or you're a traditionalist, and regardless of what's going on in your family, you have the same chronology of benefits presented to you, medical, dental, and what have you. And what I liked about his Beyond thing is for us to push the envelope around, let's start asking questions relative to where people are and what's important to them, and then for there offer benefits. So for example, we have a ton of engineers here at Benefit Focus. If I'm a 25, 26-year-old engineer, you'd be surprised. Healthcare perhaps isn't as important to me. Maybe I'm taking care of my parents, and elder care administration is far more important. We're also getting into things like financial wellness, of course, student loans, refinancing, lots of digital health. I just find that the millennials themselves, be interesting to get Jen's opinion on this. They get insurance, but they almost look at benefits beyond benefits of things that they can maximize their time and things that they can utilize to streamline their life as important, if not even more important than perhaps even medical.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, because the world is mobile and because I have all these devices, the line between work and home life is kind of blurred. So anything to really extend and make my time more manageable, commuter benefits, mortgage help, laundry service, I sort of think of a broader range of benefits and not just limited to these traditional plans like we normally talk about.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're an employer that recruits millennials, you need to know that. I mean, you need to know that they're not going to get as equally as excited as a medical plan as they would be, whether it is some kind of, Uber for healthcare or clinics or things of that nature. They just look at the whole world of benefits in a far different spot. We sort of categorize it as, you get folks right out of college and that have baggage that are looking to get rid of the baggage associated with debt, and then from there, advance onward. But I'm excited about where benefits are heading, because I think as a result of what the millennials are doing, and the fact that, candidly, I think as we get older, probably one of the most important things that you manage is your actual time. And anything to give people back more time through additional services that they can purchase on the platform is a great value.
Great. We also took a look at when these benefits were available to individuals, who was selecting them. And I think one of the things we saw was that those in a PPO are enrolling at twice the rate of those that are on a high deductible health plan. Jeff, why do you think that is?
I mean, a few slides ago, so traditionalists and baby boomers are leading the PPO charge. Not terribly surprising. They've known PPOs the majority of their career. They make more money. They're at an age to where chronic conditions, cardiovascular disease, or even just if they had it in their family, that's top of mind. So it doesn't surprise me at all that they're purchasing additional coverage above and beyond PPO. There's crazy opportunity in the HDHP to be able to leverage that from a pre-deductible, coverage protection perspective. But no, I think with the older generations buying PPO, it doesn't surprise me whatsoever that they're packaging both that with voluntary benefits.
And how does this compare to those that we have about 103 large employers now using the benefit store?
Yeah. So this is the antithesis. In the benefits store, just because we've done so much great work with our partners in the simplification process, people are able to look at it a bit more holistically. And so, like our HDHP VB adoption is 2.5x what you're seeing here. But I don't know in an employer's defense if necessarily they sort of connected the dots on these products around higher deductibles, and then where these products come into play. I mean, even our team, years ago, these products have been around for a long time, accident and CI and HI, but it was really after sort of breaking them down and building them back up on our platform and looking at the average American and where they were that we find these products are actually going to have like a renaissance, that they're going to be viewed completely differently than they ever were before, just because the structure of what most employers, the types of plans they're going to have.
And Ron, do you agree?
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about the participation in the PPO, and to Jeff's point about the baby boomers, so I tell you, from my experience, I'm used to having those lower deductibles, so I'm more inclined to want to close that gap. So while baby boomers, traditionalists may be, have higher earning power, at the same time, what they're used to contributes to that level of participation as well, I think.
Great.
Yeah.
So, a couple of key findings. HSAs are popular yet underutilized. 36% of employers are offering traditional gap products, and less than 30% of HDHP participants are selecting them. What we'd like to do now is we're going to do a quick wrap up on some of the implications that we see as a team for 2016. And we intended this session to end a few minutes early, and then we're going to stick around here up front on the stage to answer any questions that you might have about the research. You'll also see copies of the study at the booth, and it's the first of an ongoing research series that we'll be publishing here that we're excited about. So, Jeff, maybe starting with you, what are the implications for 2016?
Well, I mean, I think consumerism is here to stay, and again, whether that's as a form of an HDHP or higher deductible PPOs. Again, I agree with Ron's comment that just the plan design itself isn't going to change behavior. I think for employers, continued education around not only how to utilize these plans, but candidly how to be a different kind of consumer. I will unfortunately, embarrassingly admit that when I was in HMOs and PPOs, I didn't walk into the physician's office and say, how much is this going to cost? And do I really need that MRI? And do you have generics or any kind of therapeutic alternatives and what have you? But I think for employers, if I was in their position, is almost creating a culture of I don't know, greater participation, active participation in medical, so that even if you're still offering PPOs, there's no reason whatsoever that folks shouldn't be asking those questions. I still see greater opportunity for digital health and telehealth as well for folks that are in CDHP plans. So I think consumerism is here to stay, but just don't rely on a plan design. Ensure that you're getting word out to your folks around how to question and utilize healthcare on a more active basis.
Right. Seth?
Right. Yeah, my vantage point's a little more holistic here, in that this is actually a sign of progress and a sign of change, and that we and consumers are actually evaluating through choice the actual domestic health care policy, which is obviously a hot topic right now with the election season coming up soon. But in reality, this is great research, and combined with the expertise of all of you out there, I really think it's going to help us drive and come to the right healthcare policy.
Yeah, we're still learning. We're learning as both as a plan sponsor, an employer, and employees as consumers, what this whole healthcare thing costs. I mean, we know generally more about purchasing a DVR than we do about choosing healthcare. So I think it creates an obligation as plan sponsors to educate and to empower and to help to personalize some of those options. So from what we see in the data, certainly choice is a key part of it. It's part of daily life and all other areas, and so it'll be more and more the rule, certainly than the exception.
And I'm going to bring it back to our friend the millennial. I think we can be kind of harsh on them sometimes. We have to give them a little bit of slack. We work in a very complex environment, and they're looking at these things for the first time, and there's a huge educational opportunity to give them personalized, consistent, transparent messaging across all platforms.
Great. Well, guys, thanks for joining us here today. Those of you in the audience, we're really excited about this research initiative. We'd love your feedback on it and other areas you'd like to see us explore in the future. We're going to stick around here for 10, 15 minutes. If you've got some questions, you want to come up and chat about it. But otherwise, thanks again for joining us after lunch.
Thank you.